This lesson is part of a figure construction course I just released on Proko.com. The course goes through the basics of drawing lines and primitive shapes to using shapes to build complex anatomy and full figures. The course has 5 hours of lectures, demonstrations, assignments, and student critique videos. The course is currently set as a pre-sale. During that time, it's going to be 20% off. Pre-sale ends February 8th, and the course will be available in full then. Check out the link in the description for more info. Thanks, and enjoy the video.
And then let's try one hand too. So we did go through a couple hand drawings. And so this one would be, I think in a hand drawing like this, I would probably approach it less like above, where I'm stacking shapes, and then more, my emphasis would be more on the idea of foreshortening perspectives. And that's why I chose these, so you could see kind of a contrast between these two approaches to how to foreshorten something. One that's based on shape and stacking, more landscape-like, and then something that might be more intensely perspective-based, like this hand. So what I'm thinking about to start would be, here's the forearm, and I'm using like the landmarks of the wrist. So this would be the radius, and this is the side plane. This rounded area here would be the carpal tunnel, and that would be a shape that you could stack in front. So that's definitely exaggerated, but you could see that there would be a different form or displacement of form and volume here. And then if we were to look at the palm of the hand, which we described earlier as a deck of cards with a peak or some kind of roof to it, that's coming this way, kind of, and down. And that peak is always, because yet we haven't drawn a top view of the hand, that peak is always at the middle finger. So that would be the apex of the top of the palm or the roof. And then here would be the front face. And I could even see a little bit of that bottom of the palm as it stretches with the fingers up. So that gives me 2 boxes and some kind of mediating ovoid in the middle to overlap. The direction of the door wedge of the thumb, I would say, is pulling this way. So remember, that's that quality of door wedge, the quality of that door wedge gets to move and kind of ab or adduct relative to the palm. So what I'm trying to do here is create an overlap and a wrapping line or form intersection to get this to feel like it's on the side of that box. So it has to be in front of it here, behind it there, and then it has its own gesture. So it's moving out that way. For the fingers here, we would do the same setup. Sphere, straight, which is me thinking about the proportion of the first digit. So proximal, knuckle, middle, knuckle, distal. And then once I have that, then I could start to kind of integrate in between the explanation of space via those cylinders. So you can see there's a little bit of the first, what we just talked about, the stacking and positioning of 2D shape, one in front of the next. And then this one, I'm filling that in with the 3D space. So that would look like that for that finger. And then I would use this as a point of reference to then come back on top and soften with the sharps and curves, which we could do. The thumb on this side would be a little bit easier, a little bit more manageable. So sphere, straight for the thumb. So next knuckle. One thing to keep in mind when you're drawing hands is that the theme of the hands would really be the peak and the rise and fall of the carpal. So that you would follow everywhere. So high, low, even the knuckles, right? So the ends of the fingers would follow that. So this one, sphere, straight, sphere. So proximal, middle, distal. And so, but I'm also trying to sight this because I see that fingertip hitting the outside edge of the palm. And then I'll do it over here too. So ring finger now. You could also treat this as just like individual shapes if you wanted as well. This way, with fingers, it just helps me because I can focus on the the direct area of overlaps. So this finger much less foreshortened, so that kind of comes out this way. So let's turn that down and kind of give it a bit of a lighter touch so that we could build some of those cleaner lines on top. Okay. So if I'm going to start working on this, let's start over here with this thumb. I'm going to finish off some of the fingers, and I'd keep this sharp, rigid, kind of sharper, plainer lines on top. And then everything on the bottom would be S curve or C curve from the back of one knuckle to the center of the next. And then here, this kind of flips out, so I'm seeing underneath. So we'd have a corner here. So what I'm trying to show is the difference in texture. Top of the finger might be sharp or is sharp. Bottom is soft or curved. There. And then in this one, we have sharp, top, and then you could still use the same approach. Just go back of this to the center of the next, back of this sphere, center of the next, back of this one, and then just wrap that to the finger. But the same thing would be the case in that in this area, I'd be looking for those overlaps. So this to the next digit, using S curves in this one because the fingers are stretching the underside. So I'd want this to kind of feel a little bit more stretched or elongated. This sharper. But really trying to keep clarity around those areas of overlap. So we get that starting to feel as if it's coming forward. This got a little dark, a little heavy in here. That would be a nice area to kind of bring in more of that feeling of atmosphere. So maybe a little lighter, just to allow for that transition, light to dark. And then we'd have some of that, the padding or the mass of the palm around that. This area here would be filled in by muscle. So that would be an additional shape that I would start to stack or add up. This got a little bit. Let's bring this in just a little bit too. Just to clarify some of the perspectives. So upper digit or proximal digit. Then we get the skin stretching. And then here's the end of the finger. So I did the rule, or I broke the rule, or I made the mistake that I think is so common to foreshortening where I made it too long. So that's probably a better proportional length for that. And then if we kind of go on to some of the other ones to design this next finger, could have our, let's just go on this one right to the contour and see if I could develop the feeling of the overlaps with just the kind of imagining the cylinders underneath. Sometimes that's a good exercise because you can practice your ability to collapse stages. So this as a shape could exist in front of the next digit. That would go around here. So sharp on top, still curve on the bottom. And then that would be here. Here's this stretch. So this would almost be like thinking the first, what we talked about above. And then I'd have from there a transition, maybe like we could think of this as that's the height of that plane where the fingers would connect. And then that plane would then move me down into the stretch of the bottom of the palm. So then at least, the very least, that starts to come in front. We're not going to play around with building any of the tendons or anything, but eventually I would try to use, just like I am kind of designing the fingers on top, I'd use the same type of lines to come in and start designing, softening some of the areas of construction around the palm and wrist. But I mean, it could be that you think of it as a finger, but it's also just a series of forms, you know, like balls, cylinders stacked one in front of the other. It's probably best that you don't think of it as a finger. I kind of cycle through both, you know, part the concept so that I can make the drawing work the way I want to, and then half of, maybe a little less than half, is kind of actively trying to match what I see so that it doesn't look too unlike what's there. But it's always some kind of synthesis between the two. In fine art, history of fine art drawing from Bernice Alice Roth forward is really a historical intersection between the tensions of drawing as something that is always thought to be directly associated with cognitive qualities. It's the most highly rational, and then the irreconcilable quality of it also needing to be kinetic. So if you look at early artists like in the Renaissance, they would strike a synthesis between those. The cognitive was, you know, the golden mean and the execution of humanism for all of culture, but then you still knew it was a Michelangelo because of his mark making. But to bring the cognitive into the kinetic is irreconcilable. And then histories or periods in history from there would play with those. Like Warhol was about denying the mark making. So his was all cognitive. So that's just maybe some interesting framework to think about how common the tension is between, you know, what you see and understand and then how you choose to represent it. And then so this last finger would be the least foreshortened, but we could just stack that with some shapes too. Maybe in this one, you know, I've tried each finger a little differently. The first one I was more strict about my build up, sphere, straight, sphere, straight. And then as I've moved to the left side, I've chosen more organic volumes. Like these are kind of boxy cylinders to get the fingers on this side to work. And then you could see how I kind of create form modifications with each, where now I'm looking for a bottom plane or carving that so that it has a clearer top and bottom. So that would be the front, and then how that turns back. This thumb's still bugging me. Let's make that. I think what I'm missing here is just that angle. So instead of thinking of it as a thumb, I just need to come back and really allow it to be a box for a moment. So sometimes when I struggle more with an area, I kind of have to strip it back down and let it just be a volume, and then from there kind of slowly nudge it into having more organic qualities. So hopefully this helps just give you a bit of a different way of appreciating the different volumes and techniques that we've put together, separate from just being some standing figures. These would be the ways that I'd kind of deal with some more difficult poses or challenging poses around having to foreshorten some areas.